Haruto Tsukishiro awakens in a mysterious dream world inhabited by strange and powerful entities called witches, the first of them being Yuko Sakurabe, the Witch of Thunder. Haruto's only sources of companionship are Lily, a white-haired girl that calls Haruto her brother, and Katsumi Kanzaki, a scientist who has been researching the dream world. Yuko finds Haruto and attempts to convince him to play with her. At first, Haruto refuses, but when Kanzaki almost gets killed, he is forced to accept. His attempts to appease Yuko are for naught, as she attempts to kill him as well. Fortunately, Haruto realizes that any injuries he suffers in the dream world are not real, so he easily survives Yuko's attacks. With Lily's help, Haruto realizes Yuko is actually a sad, heartbroken girl who went to the dream world after suffering a cruel prank in the real world. Haruto helps Yuko come to terms with her pain and allows her to return to the real world. As Yuko wakes up, the dream world produces a blue door that, according to Kanzaki and Lily, will take Haruto back to the real world. But when Haruto goes through it, he is taken back to the room where the episode started. Haruto simply decides to sleep again, hoping to find another way to return home. Haruto has a frightening dream of a woman mercilessly killing someone grotesquely, and wakes up to find that Professor Katsumi confirms his dream to be true and that the witch has killed someone. The professor explains that a crime occurred 10 years ago when a family of 4 was attacked in their home, but the youngest daughter survived by hiding in a closet while her parents and older sister were killed. The dream Haruto shared with the witch was an image of one of the 3 killers getting murdered in the same way the mother was. Thus the greatest suspect is the youngest sister, who is also afflicted with a disorder called Sleeping Beauty Syndrome. As Haruto returns to the dream world, Professor Katsumi contacts the remaining 2 killers, who reveal they have had the same dream each time of themselves getting chased by red heels before being killed, like how the father and older sister were. Due to fright, they have tried their best to remain awake, but one of them eventually gives in and is murdered in front of Haruto in the dream world, where he encounters the witch. Seeing his friend decapitated in real life, the last person, the brains behind the murdering and the one who orchestrated everything, decides to go to sleep. However, this is all part of a plan for him to awaken his subconsciousness in the dream world, where he attempts to kill the witch after finding out anything can happen in the dream world as long as you think it in your mind. Before the witch is overpowered, Haruto steps in and kills the mastermind in the exact manner as how the witch would want it to be. Thankful and satisfied that the killers were brought to justice, the witch leaves the dream world and wakes up in the hospital wanting to meet Haruto and thank him properly. The next episode begins with a new freshman in high school named Ko Sujisake starting her first day. Later, she wakes up and begins her day by walking to the park, with Haruto passing by on her way. She sees him again at the park and he sits down on the bench next to hers. Haruto begins to make conversation with Ko, but she starts coughing. When he asks her if she is alright, she becomes embarrassed and hurriedly insists she is fine, then thanks him and runs off. Haruto later wakes up lying on the same bench and begins to walk up the road where he once again passes Ko on her way to the park. Lily appears, pushing him to go back and talk to her. He begins with the same conversation. That night, Ko has flashbacks of red lights, jumbled voices shouting, a siren and a brief flash of an image of surgeons surrounding her. She repeats her routine and heads to the park, and once again meets Haruto. They begin to bond over the cat, and eventually, after Ko informs him she is frail in constitution and thus doesn't have the stamina to go far from her home or do much beyond her routine, he invites her to hang out with him the next day. They meet the next morning and he takes her out on a moped to the beach for the day, allowing her to enjoy the sand, shells and sparklers until after dark. That night, Lily returns, vaguely warning Haruto that Ko is in some kind of need of help. The morning after, Ko is anxious to see Haruto, and becomes overwhelmed until she collapses. She begins to have flashbacks of her own experiences with her real-life terminal illness and becomes frustrated, spurring on her transformation into a witch. As she transforms, Ko sees herself confined to a bed on a ventilator and remembers how after beginning high school her illness worsened and was often absent from class, stuck in the infirmary. In her memories, she returns to her desk to find a flyer for a school festival she isn't well enough to attend. Haruto calls her name, pulling her out of her memories upon the completion of her transformation into the Witch of First Love. After the transformation, Haruto converses with Katsumi in his cat avatar form, where he tells Haruto that the dream world will remain stable, but only for a short time. Along with her appearance, Ko's demeanor changes into a fun-loving, excited girl with a strong enough physical constitution that she can choose to walk around the town. Every day afterward, Ko and Haruto do something new, exciting and fun. Finally, they visit her school, though she initially hesitates to go inside until he goes in first. Standing by her own desk, she begins to cry before sights and sounds of a school festival surround them, returning her to glee. He walks her home, though she doesn't appear to want to return there. Again, the next morning, Haruto meets with KO, though he notices her forehead is hot. Seemingly embarrassed again, she gets up to run away but she trips and falls. His increasing concern for her makes her laugh at him, confusing him. That night, KO contemplates on the relationship she's developing with Haruto, wondering if it constitutes as dating and getting flustered at the idea of kissing him when they get to her house. The next day, she resolves to give him a love letter she's written to him, but upon seeing him, the scene begins to play out like the morning before, only this time she gives him the letter. Just as he's about to take it, KO's dream world begins to crack, she collapses, and in the real world, her vitals begin to fail. KO in the dream searches for the letter, determined to get her feelings for Haruto out to him. She reveals to him that she was at the park and had eavesdropped on Haruto and Katsumi. She confesses she was happy to experience what it must be like to live a normal, healthy life and have a boyfriend to spend time with. She thanks him for the joy he's given her before, returning to her original high schooler form, and confesses her love for him, hoping he remembers it and keeps her in his heart. He hugs her just as she disappears. He cries to the sunset after reading her letter, mourning her loss. In the real world, a smile is seen on KO's face as she passes away. Eri Kojima is frivolously dumped by her boyfriend over a thinner model, degrading Eri's own modeling efforts as an amateur and making her feel bad about herself before casually walking away. She begins to binge and purge in an extremely unhealthy effort to slim down. In the dream world, Haruto is enjoying curry with two other girls when suddenly the Witch of Gluttony bursts into the room and interrupts the meal, leaving everyone bewildered. She becomes irritated when he remarks how tiny she is and hurls massive donuts at him, and as he's pelted with one, he wakes up, still in the dream world. In the real world, Eri struggles to weigh herself, disappointed at her scale results. She heads to work at a coffee shop, a place whose curry rice is favored by Katsumi. His enjoyment of the curry rice reminds her of her own inability to enjoy food the same way. In the dream world, Haruto wakes up to see Katsumi eating a box of donuts and pushing Haruto to eat one, irritating him until he kicks Katsumi out. Lily proceeds to dance around the room similarly to Katsumi, singing about her love of donuts. She leaves through a red door, earning Haruto to come with her. Immediately upon entering the realm of the Witch of Gluttony, he is bombarded and chased by dozens of giant donuts. Deciding to go with it, he takes a chomp out of a donut he lands on, noticing there's no taste to it. The Witch of Glutton proceeds to launch her candy attack at him, turning him into a donut that Lily reappears and begins to eat. At the same time, in the real world, Eri is beginning her binge. Haruto wakes up from his nightmare and finds a murmuring Lily sleeping in the same bed, but not for long, as when Katsumi shows up, she disappears from the bed. Katsumi puts Haruto back to sleep with his further ranting about curry. In his dream, Haruto enjoys the same curry meal with the same two girls. In the real world, Eri wakes up and remembers her grandmother's curry Eri used to have often a child. She steps on the scale and laments how it shows she's gained weight. As her issues with bulimia continue, Haruto has the same dream of being chased by candy of bulimia nuts, with Lily initially having a blast beside him as he struggles, night after night, until even Lily's eventually had enough. She leaves and Haruto becomes trapped in front of the Witch of Gluttony, who expresses a desire to eat whatever she wants while still maintaining her figure. She begins destroying the realm around them and Haruto falls into the same dream of eating curry, this time with a grown-up Eri and the Witch of Gluttony. Haruto asks why the witch isn't eating, and she confesses she's not eating because she's concerned about gaining weight and explains the incident where Eri was dumped due to her weight. Haruto encourages her to try the curry, reassuring her that weight gain or loss isn't as important as enjoying the meal. The Witch of Gluttony tries a spoonful and remembers her Eri's days as a little girl at her grandmother's house during the summers, and she is able to come to peace with herself and her love of food. That morning, in the real world, Eri returns for another shift at work, determined to start loving herself, and to find a significant other worthy of her love.